This is the Artillery Hornet, and today we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the somewhat ugly. I'm Ken, the 3D Printing Slot Tech, and this is On the Road 3D Printing.
Waiting for satellites.
Hi, Future Ken here. Doing the editing and realized I made a huge gaffe. I am not a slot tech, and I have not been one in almost a decade. I'm a survey tech. First time going around, didn't even realize I made that mistake, and I've watched that video quite a bit until I was just now editing it. So, I'm a survey tech, not a slot tech. Okay, so first things first, the dimensions. The X and Y are both 220, and the Z or Z is 250. It is an Ender 3 style clone, and it is running Marlin firmware. I've had it for almost 3 weeks now, and I'm currently running it through Octoprint. I had initially planned a review for a couple of weeks ago, but there were some issues, but we'll get into those. Had I stuck with Cura, it would have cut off almost 2 weeks of issues. I downloaded somebody else's profile for Super Slicer, and that's where I ran into 99% of my issues. Something I didn't know to check for, that I know now to check for, was the filament override settings. Those had been turned on. So every change I made didn't seem to make a change in the follow-up print. As you can see, I went through quite a few retraction tests, and there are actually a lot more than just that. Those are just the ones that I saved before finally getting a proper retraction test. And of course, once that was done, knocked it over, I had to start printing benchies. There is some stringing, and the lines don't look great. And the bottom, I know it's hard to tell because this is very shiny GTS3 filament. But the bottom, that bottom looks a little better, but I still had some stringing, and there was definitely some over extrusion. Finally, I got a really good one. Bottom still needs a little bit of work. There's no over extrusion. Everything looks good. I know it's really can't see it on camera. But even the sealing looks good. Hi, it's me again. One of the things that I forgot to mention in the video was the nozzle. After I fixed the E-steps, was still having extrusion issues until I swapped out the nozzle. So I decided to clean the old nozzle just to see if I could see any imperfections. The only thing that I found was that a 0.5 nozzle cleaner went through it without an issue, and it shouldn't have because it said it was a 0.4. I don't think that was an artillery issue. I think that was just a bad nozzle. But I felt to be thorough that I should at least include it. And now, for some positives and negatives. I debated on calling them pros and cons, but in truth, there's only one con. The bed adhesion out of the box is insanely amazing. We're going to have to circle back to that one later. It is ridiculously quiet. It is the quietest printer I have personally ever seen. And my Ender 3 V2 was super quiet. It is quieter than that. The menu settings on it are some of the best that I've personally ever seen. It's got things in it that my Ender 3 V2 and my Ender 6 don't have. You can set the baby stepping before you even start a print, which is amazing to me because none of those have that. The Cura settings that came with it are very, very close to getting really good prints out of it. And the instruction manual is the best that I've ever seen. It's the best I've ever even seen anybody talk about. First off, it's thick. Like, when I tell you it's thick, it's thick. And just the English portion of it is 21 pages. Now, unfortunately, there are some negatives. The glass bed is not removable without a lot of work. I prefer a PEI sheet, and that was one of the first things I was going to do was swap it out. Unfortunately, you have to peel it off. The next negative, I'm assuming, is just my machine, because I have not heard this with any other machine so far on any other review or any other message board. My E-steps were 30 millimeters off out of 100. Thankfully, that was one of the first things I checked when I started having issues. So I fixed that problem within the first day or two. The only other true negative is the tools. They do give you tools. Unfortunately, it won't focus on it. They are very small. And when you are first starting out putting it together, you have 3 screws back here that you have to put in. Then unfortunately, those won't reach. The 2 screws that are up top are relatively easy to do, but that one in the middle is not. Now, one of the things that every other reviewer has talked about so far is this. And this is the reason that I have the bunny ears on here, because when I was first looking at this machine, somebody said this would catch on here. Mine hasn't even come close to that. But one of the issues that everybody had is the PTFE tube runs the entire length. And those reviewers were worried about having to replace that tube. But in all honesty, you should never have to replace it in here, because the only PTFE tube that you're going to have to replace is inside the actual hot end in here. Because unfortunately that is a PTFE lined hot end. I will eventually be swapping it out for an all-metal hot end, but I'm just not there yet. And if you do want to buy an extra one of these just to keep around just in case, they're only $18, which sounds like a lot, but your regular package of these cost me $12. So it's not that big of a difference to me. Now to, unfortunately, what I consider to be the only con. When you first get this machine, if this is your first machine, everything is going to stick to this bed. Literally everything. Unfortunately, that is because it is coated in what I can only assume is a nanopolymer adhesive. That's a good thing for people who are just starting out to build that confidence. Unfortunately, if you don't tell them it's coated in that, that can quickly become a negative, especially if they're cleaning the bed as often as I do, which is after every print, I'm wiping it down with IPA, and that quickly goes away. I completely understand why they did that, but it would have been better to me if that was in the instructions or in something. It told you somewhere that it was coated in that. And before anybody says anything, I know a lot of companies are doing that. It's just not something I like. So these are just some of the things that I've printed so far. All of these came out super amazing. Extremely happy with all of them. This one had a very slight layer shift all the way down, but I also got that same layer shift on my Ender 6, so I'm thinking it's the slicer, not the printer. The next print's a little bit funny because it would have completed beautifully, but somebody turned my smart plug off. So as you can see, all of this is done and it worked amazingly till you get to about right here, and that's where it just stopped, like completely stopped. And unfortunately, because I was running it on Octoprint, not on the SD card, I couldn't just resume it. I also got an awesome Falcor. And before I had everything dialed in, one of the only other issues I was having was it would go good until about right here. And that's where they would all just kind of stick. To the point where I broke one of them. So, final thoughts. I think it's a really good machine. I've had it for 3 weeks. I haven't had any issues with it that weren't slicer, except for the E-steps, which is kind of a hang-up if you're brand new, because it's probably not the first thing you're going to look for. However, other than that, if you have any experience at all, this is going to be a good machine. And it is ridiculously quiet. I'm standing next to it with a mic on, and you can barely hear it. I can barely hear it when I'm next to it playing D&D on Roll20. And the other people can't hear it at all, which is not something that could be said for the Ender 6 behind me. I can't play anywhere around the Ender 6 whenever we're on Roll20, because that's all they can hear are the fans. This is running at 100%. The design looks good. I love the fact that it does use a full-size SD card. The menu's good. It runs through Octoprint just fine. I see a lot of potential in it, and I think it's going to be a good one. Just make sure you check your E-steps. If you've made it this far, I want to say a personal thank you. This is my very first product review, and this is not sponsored in any way. So I bought the machine, I bought everything. I just wanted to say thank you. And I want to know all your thoughts. Literally all of them. The good, the bad, what I did right, what I did wrong, what needs to change. Any of that will be a great help to me. I'm Ken, and this is On the Road 3D Printing. Thank you.
Observation stored.